So I consider myself a pretty capable traveler. The evidence? I've traveled to over 50 countries in my lifetime, and I'm here to tell you about it. Pretty low bar, but good enough. Now, two things I know from years of hoofing it around the world. One is something we talk about here a lot, that the bad thing is never the last thing. And the bad thing is usually the story you tell when you get home. So with that in mind, we'll start my sermon. So Kristen and I just returned from Spain, where we visited our son Desmond, who's studying over there for a semester in Seville. He's doing well. It was nice to be with him for a while. And Kristen and I traveled separately because of different work obligations that we had to accommodate. The flights went through Madrid. I hadn't been to the Madrid airport before. It is an enormous airport. Kristen left Seville before I did. She landed in Madrid. She sent me a text that said, "Connections are tight and movement through the airport is complicated." Good tips? So when I left, instead of wearing my travel clogs, which I wear to slip on and off when I'm sitting in the plane, I decided to wear my running shoes, just in case I needed to make an emergency dash. See, I'm an experienced traveler. So I board the plane in Seville. I plop down in my seat next to the window, earphones already securely in place because I'm an experienced traveler. But it turns out I sit down in the wrong seat. 27A, I guess, looks a lot like 28A in Spanish. The woman I displaced arrived a little bit later, and she was flexible enough to just go sit in 28A. Now, even with my earphones on, I hear her behind me talking to the man in 28B about catching her flight to Dallas. Same connection that I have to make. She's worried because we're leaving Seville an hour late, and the connection time is tight. I note the conversation. We land in Madrid. We have 45 minutes to make it through the airport to get on my flight to Dallas. So I'm ready for the run. I've done this before. I'm an experienced traveler. Passport, boarding pass, front right pocket. Bag slung over my shoulder. Of course, we have to take a bus from the plane to the terminal. So I get on the bus, but I position myself right there next to the door. And as I do, I notice the man from 28B is doing the same thing. Doors open. He shoots off the bus. I fall in behind him. I decide to follow him through the airport. He's Spanish. And I suspect his native status is going to give him some advantage. I'm an experienced traveler. I know you stick with the locals under these circumstances. I further intuit, based on how I would do things, that the plan had been for him to run ahead, right, and to tell the boarding agent that his wife was on the way and to hold the plane. So he's a surprisingly good runner. I hadn't anticipated that. I tuck in behind him to draft off him as he's tearing through the airport and literally yelling at people to get out of his way. Very much the right choice, but not once in this run did he turn around to look at me. And I know he knew I was there. I was hot on his heels. I'm panting, right? My feet are pounding. Doesn't look at me. So we're about 10 minutes in, big airport, and I noticed that we're in Terminal K, gate 56. Now, last I checked, we were supposed to depart from Terminal S. But I'm an experienced traveler. Gates change. I know this. But I pull up next to him. He doesn't even look at me. But I pull up next to him, and I stammer, "Dallas?" And his response was, "Toulouse." Now, I'm pretty sure Toulouse is not a suburb of Dallas. So it seems now I've made a few incorrect assumptions, beginning with the assumption that the woman in 28a was traveling with the man in 28b. Turns out not to be the case. I don't know why I made that assumption. After all, she was in my seat. And so you're wondering, what's the point of this story? Other than never travel with Deutt. Well, the point is, I was in the wrong story. I was in a story that I was looking at through the rearview mirror of all of my past travel experiences. And what I had forgotten was the necessity of being present to the story that I was in. And my inattentiveness meant that I was in Terminal K in the massive Madrid airport when I needed to be in Terminal S for a flight that was leaving now in 30 minutes. Now, when we are not attuned to the story that we are currently in, we do not have the capacity to accurately assess or read the signs of the times. So this is where I shift now in the sermon to the season of Advent. Because Advent is the season where we practice reading the signs of the times. And to read the signs of the times is to be attuned to what God is requiring of us in the world right here, right now. Right? In fact, the point of our existence, the reason any of us are, is to be attuned to what God is doing with us in the world right now. After all, that is why we exist, full stop. We exist simply because God set us here. We exist simply to be agents, to be children of God, people of hope, right, who are formed by choice in the following of Jesus, to be able to care for our neighbors, to be people of courage who understand that we have a God that we can trust. And it starts, I think, by remembering to take our earphones off, by being open, not closed, by being connected, not isolated, by being in the world as God is, as God decided to do, as God role modeled for us through the incarnation of Jesus, the birth of Jesus, which is what we anticipate in this season of Advent. It necessitates the rigor of not plugging new data into the framework of an old story, but rather experiencing the story we are in at any given moment in time. It's to be ready at all times for a new thing that God may be doing, and that's the theme of Advent. Now, the spiritual exercise that is designed to help us, to train us to be better at this, is the spiritual exercise of the sermon. The spiritual exercise of the sermon is to enable us to be more capable of reading the signs of the times. And it begins by taking the words spoken by me, the preacher, at face value. Take them for what they are. And yes, while the words that land up on this piece of paper come from the context of my life and they bump up against the things that are spinning around in my mind, they're given to you to be taken at face value. Which is why the preaching team here at Epiphany is very careful about how we construct sermons. We edit them with diligence, running them through a rigorous process so the words can stand on their own. And this is important because we are Christians. Right? This is important because as Christians, we believe in a transparent spirituality, in a transparent religion. We are not Gnostics. It's why we're not Gnostics. There is no secret knowledge in our spirituality. Our sermons are meant to be received as they are, given for you, to weave them into your own context, right? And to wonder what they mean in your own life. Right? So you may not have been to Madrid. Maybe some of you have never been in an airplane. Maybe some of you have never been to an airport, but I do know that every single one of you has encountered a stranger. I do know that every single one of you has made assumptions about them based on your history, based on what you are seeing and hearing in your own head, not in the reality of the moment that you are in. And that can happen anywhere. It can happen at a school function. It can happen at the grocery store. It can happen walking down the street, a dark street late at night. It can happen at church. It happened to me in Terminal K as I watched the man from Toulouse disappear into the crowd. Now, it would have been nice to blame him for my situation and the feelings that I was feeling, of which there were many feelings that I was feeling. But I knew he was not part of a secret plot to ensure that I missed my flight. Simply part of my story. And interestingly, a part of my story that he will never know that he is a part of. He doesn't even know what I look like. And that, in my hard stop there at Terminal K, was an aha moment for me. Right? Because imagine all the stories we have been in where we are the agents, the people who have transformed a bad thing into a story of redemption for somebody else. A bad thing that they were experiencing, you were the agent into a story of redemption that they may even be telling to this day. And so my invitation to you in this season of Advent is to be an active agent that seeks an opportunity to transform someone's bad thing into a blessing. Can you do that? All right. I know you can. And that is what was spinning through my mind as I was huffing and puffing and shuffling my way back from Terminal K to immigration. Turns out I had to go through immigration before I could even get on the train to Terminal S on a flight that was due to leave in 15 minutes. And who do I run into in that line? The woman from 28A. So I go stand next to her, and she's completely freaked out that she's going to miss the flight to Dallas. So I tell her the story of the man from Toulouse. She thinks it's super funny. And it loosened the tension a bit in that immigration line that was pretty tense. See, because sharing our stories can be helpful, right? It can make a difference. And in particular, it can help us attune us to a new story. I was particularly attuned to the fact that I was part of a new story in that moment. And as I stood there, aware of that, I see a young woman. I noticed her. She got tears in her eyes. Not a Seth Meyers reference. She's got tears in her eyes. She's crying. She's trying to budge up into the front of the immigration line because she's freaking out that she is going to miss her flight to Bogota. She doesn't speak any English. My Spanish is really not so good. But I knew enough to know where she was going. And people were not being very kind to her. So I wave her over to me, and I let her budge in front of me in immigration. And only now does it occur to me that I may be part of the story that she tells when she gets back home about how the bad thing wasn't the last thing. See, when we get out of the stories that are receding in our rearview mirror and into the present, we're better able to read the signs of the times. And that is what we focus on, and that is what we practice in the season of Advent. It is how we prepare for the incarnation of God's Son. It's how we prepare ourselves to be in this world charged with making it a better place. And we train to do that. We train to get good at this. We train to get good at hearing what we are hearing without implying intent or correlation. Just hearing what we're hearing and seeing what we're seeing. You know, it was the woman in 28A who was going to Dallas. All the rest were assumptions I was making, false correlations I was tracking. Had I been curious, had I taken off my earphones, had I been present, I would have more accurately read the signs of the times. But there I was, sweating as I was moving through immigration. And the clock was ticking, and I was nervous that I was going to miss this flight. At this point, my earphones were deeply buried in my carry-on luggage. And as I passed through immigration, right, I turned to the woman from 28A, and I said to her, "I'll hold the plane for you." And I took off running. And I'm here to tell you about it.